Okay, what I usually do at this period of time is like when we're discussing the vines and discussing what's going on in the vineyard. I call this like Vineyard 101. It's just very basic, low down, basic information. I'm going to talk to you about, the 4 seasons, what's going on in the vineyard, all 4 seasons. I'll also talk to you a little bit about how they plant these vineyards, and then, maybe how they manage them a little bit throughout the year as well, okay? So let me take you through the life cycle of a vineyard. Okay, first of all, in the wintertime, what happens is that all of these cordons right here, is what they're called, all these get cut off all the way back to here. Okay, this is the main part of the vine. This trellising right here is what we call a lyre system. The lyre system, which is like after the musical instrument. But then most of the trellising you'll see out in the Yadkin Valley is what we call VSP, which is just straight line. Okay, straight horizontally. So, but yeah, all these cordons get cut off in the wintertime. You don't want to cut them too early. There's still sap in there. You can kill the vine if you cut too early. So you got to wait for the sap to go down, back into the ground, and that's usually right around late January, early February. If you wait too late to cut them, the sap might be coming up the vine, and you'll bleed out the vine and kill it as well. So you have to be careful about when you're cutting these off, okay? And what they do is they drop them to the ground, they rake them off, and they mulch them. And that's, in the wintertime, they'll still do a couple spraying, just to kind of make sure everything stays killed off as far as disease and pests. And so they go into the vines go into a dormant phase, which is important because you got to have that, okay, going into the next season, okay, which is spring. And so the springtime rolls around here in the Yadkin Valley, usually right around April, mid-April, we'll have what's called bud break. And what that is the saps start coming back out of the roots, out of the taproot, up into the vine, and these little buds start forming all along through here. And it's so important where you cut these vines to make sure you cut them off right in the wintertime, because that's where your little buds are going to come back out from, okay, for the next year's growth. Okay, and typically you'll get about 2 bunches per cordon, okay, as far as production goes. So you have to be very careful. All of this is done by hand out here too. I know in Napa they do a lot of machinery type of harvesting and stuff like that. Here in the Yadkin Valley, everything's done by hand. So bud break happens about mid-April. We get into May, you get into what's called the growing season. And these things you can almost sit here, and some of these different varietals, it's like watching them grow every day. You can sit here and watch them grow by inches every day. And they get very high. The canopy area, which is this part of the vine, gets really tall, even like 2 or 3 feet taller than this. Okay, and they do have to keep that cut back through the growing season because they want the vine to focus its energy back down to this area, which is we call, our harvesting area, and this is where most of your grape clusters are going to grow. Okay, so this is our fruiting area, as you would call it. And that's where you're going to focus most of the growth of your grape clusters. Any clusters that are growing up here typically get either cut off or dropped to the ground during the course of managing the vines in the summertime. Now, summertime, the only thing we have to worry about in the Yadkin Valley that can be damaging to these vines, there's a couple things. There's a pest that comes out called Japanese beetles. The beetles attack the top of the vine, like right here. See this leaf right here where it's been chewed off? But you notice that only at the top of the vine has it been chewed on, and that's what Japanese beetles do. They attack from the top down. All right, so a Japanese beetle can actually eat a lot of the leaves off of your vines. If you're not careful, you let them go uncontrolled and unchecked, then you're going to have a problem because these leaves convert energy for the grapes. Okay, they're so important, converting that solar energy into the fruit. So you can't let the Japanese beetles run wild on you in the summertime. So what a lot of the vineyard managers do is they'll let this canopy area grow tall and thick right at the time when those beetles are coming out and give them plenty of things to chew on besides down here. Because this is the last area they want them to chew on, is right down here. Now, the other thing is, in the summertime, the other thing we have a problem with is the possibility of a tropical storm or a hurricane or something like that coming into this area and dropping a lot of wind and a lot of rain in a short period of time. And that even goes into our harvest time into the fall as well. A hurricane coming inland could absolutely wipe out your harvest in a heartbeat. And that's just because, you know, the winds can knock fruit to the ground, you know, and it's worse than having birds in your vineyard. It's worse than having deer, things of that nature. It's just very devastating. Even straight line winds, we've had problems with storms coming through and knocking down entire rows of vineyard. Okay. Now Chuck's system, this Lear system, is a lot stronger and can withstand a lot more damage from the natural elements than the VSP. Okay. So, you know, I think he's made this, but it costs twice as much than the other type of systems that are used. Now, of course, veraison occurs, and what that is basically is a time when the grapes start turning color, and the pest that we have to deal with in the fall, when that starts happening, is the birds and the deer. They like to get into the vineyards, and so what most vineyard managers will do is they'll drop netting. If anybody's been out in a vineyard in the fall when the grapes are on, you'll see a bunch of netting that's been strung all the way across each row, and that's to try to keep the birds off the grapes. A flock of birds can come in and eat an entire acre of grapes in no time. Okay, so they have to put this netting down. It's not cheap, but they have to do it or they can lose entire, you know, parts of their vineyard to birds. Deer sometimes will come in and eat the grapes. They usually like to eat the greenery as well. They're not as much of a pest, just depending on where the vineyard's located. So we don't have as much of a problem with them in this area. In the fall, when we start harvesting and the grapes are ready for harvest, you know, the vineyard manager will work tightly with the winemaker and with the owner, and they will basically take a refractometer out and smush a grape in it, look it up in the sun, and determine the sugar level of the grape, which is called the Brix level, B-R-I-X, and that would say, okay, all right, we're at 22, which is a high level of sugar. Now we need to harvest. And basically the owner and the vineyard manager, they all come to the decision, okay, we're going to harvest the Cabernet Franc. We're going to harvest the Cabernet Sauvignon. You know, they're also looking at the weather and what's coming inbound. Last thing you want to have happen to your, you know, while you're harvesting grapes is have a bunch of rainfall hit. And what happens is these vines soak up the water like crazy, and the grapes get filled with more water, and of course your sugar levels go down. So you want to harvest when the sugar levels are a lot higher. That way the natural yeast and everything else that happens at fermentation, and fermentation will take a lot shorter and not as drawn out. And you'll have deeper and richer flavors in your wine when you have a higher sugar level. All right? Now harvest time usually lasts from September on to October, and sometimes early as, you know, November. I've seen harvest start as early as late August and extends into the second week of November. It just depends. It's the call that the owner and the winemaker make on when to pull and pick the vines. Typically, the white vines are picked first. The white varietals, such as your Chardonnay, your Pinot Grigio, Sauvignon Blanc, which he grows here. Then they'll start picking the reds. And the last red usually that's picked is usually Cabernet Sauvignon or Cabernet Franc, because they usually will require a little bit more hang time to ripen out. So that's your 4 seasons. You know, here again, after the harvest time, the leaves fall off the vines. Then all you have is these bare cordons showing, and then they're clipped off, and you've had the full life cycle of the vineyard. The other part I want to talk to you about is laying out the vineyard. How do you lay this all out? Well, you notice all these rows are facing which direction? North-south. Why is that? East-west. Sun's going east-west. And what they want to do also, they want to tilt it in such a way that during the growing season, that the sun is facing the vineyard at a certain directional point. Okay? So from May through July, they want to make sure that they're getting maximum sun potential on the vineyard at that period of time. So when you're laying out the vineyard, it's very important to know where the sun's going to be in the sky during that part of the year. Okay? The other thing a vineyard manager will be doing when they're setting up a vineyard is they'll be taking core soil samples all around, every 100 yards or so. They number them, they send them off for testing, and the testing will determine what varietal is planted there. Most of y'all probably don't know that there's probably about 90 different clone varietals of Chardonnay, which means it's 90 different types of Chardonnay to plant. And which one you're going to pull. Number 73 is going to do the best here. And a program will tell you that. The soil sampling program will tell you that this is the best varietal, and it even will help you to determine which clone to put there. All right? And so that part of the vineyard might be good for for Saval, and this part over here for Cabernet Franc. You know, you just don't know this until you get your samples done. The last thing you want to do is fight nature, okay? And fight what's already in the ground. So that's important when laying out the vineyard as well. You know, another, part, does everybody know that these vines are grafted? That we in North America determined that one of the biggest problems with growing grapes, one of the biggest diseases that the Europeans are fighting all the time is phylloxera. And what it does is a disease that attacks the root system of a grapevine. Well, right down here, you have a grafting point where the vines are grafted to a native vine. So the top of that vine, when you buy it from a horticulturalist, it's going to be Saval or Cabernet Franc or whatever. The bottom could be a Concord or a Niagara because it's native and it could take the disease and it has a better resistance. And also those tap roots go down really deep. That's why Chuck doesn't have to water anything out here. These tap roots, some of them go down 20 feet. The only way, like I said, the only way you can really intentionally kill a grapevine is if you bleed it out and cut it at the wrong time. Otherwise they can withstand 2, 3, 4 weeks of drought conditions at 100 degrees. Not a problem. Matter of fact, they love it. They love being stressed out, unlike humans, all right? So grapevines love different temperatures and different climates and stuff like that. They love going through different cycling and different periods. It actually helps them out, and actually develops deeper characteristics in the wine. So another little technique I was going to share with you while we're out here is that a good vineyard manager will also probably manage underneath here really well. You want to keep all of this down here sprayed off. See how this is all brown where they've sprayed? You've got to have good airflow through your vineyard. It needs to breathe. The vineyard needs to breathe, okay? And so all of this, keeping all this clear cut out and sprayed down will actually help the vineyard breathe and actually create a better grape for you. The other thing is that they'll do is that on the morning side, which is this side, they will actually have less leaf on this side than on the other side. Can someone tell me why?
Less sun.
Well,
Less intense sun.
You got the morning dew on the grapes. So when you got grapes on these vines, you got morning dew, and if that moisture stays on that grape all the way through the afternoon, you're going to create rot, okay, and mildew. And then you have to spray, and you can spend so much money. It's much easier to go ahead and cut extra leaves off on this side and let more sun penetrate on the morning side. Then let the leaves grow on the other side a little bit extra and protect those grapes on the other side from the sun so that they don't get burnt, okay? So that's just a little, vineyard management technique that a lot of vineyard managers do just to kind of micromanage the vineyard. There's so much to growing grapes in the Yadkin Valley. There's so much to growing grapes in North Carolina. We've come a long ways over the years, and there are a lot of techniques have been tried, failed, and to learn more about it, I would suggest taking a class at Surrey Community College, which is not too far from here. They have all kind of classwork on wine education and winemaking and vineyard management, tasting room management. So anybody who's interested in getting more knowledge, there's all kinds of classwork you can take online. You don't even have to go into the classroom.